Lin Mu was an internationally renowned architect. Throughout his illustrious career, he had designed skyscrapers that pierced the clouds and museums that looked like pieces of fine art. Whenever a project was completed and the ribbon-cutting ceremony ended, Lin Mu would quickly archive the project in the filing cabinet of his memory and move on to the next one. However, in the attic of his own home, there stood an easel that was always covered by a dusty gray cloth. On it rested an unfinished oil painting. It was a depiction of his hometown, a small town with bluestone paths and a winding river. The sky in the painting was already colored in a melancholic ultramarine, and the willow trees by the river were clearly outlined. Yet, in the very center of the canvas, there was a figure holding an umbrella that remained a faint pencil sketch, devoid of any color. He had started that painting 20 years ago, on the night before he left his hometown for university. That night, he ran out of paint. He thought to himself, "I'll finish it when I come back for the holidays." But that wait lasted for 20 years. During those 2 decades, Lin Mu achieved great fame and fortune. He couldn't even remember which award he had won the previous year, nor could he recall how many glass panels were used in the project he completed last month. But in the dead of night, or whenever he hit a creative block in his designs, that colorless silhouette would leap out like a ghost. He could vividly remember the scent of the last bit of lemon yellow paint squeezed from the tube that night. He could feel the dry texture of the uncolored brush. One day, Lin Mu hit a severe mid-career burnout. He decided to return to his old home and find that painting. He bought the highest grade pigments and vowed to give that silhouette the most perfect colors, finally putting this lingering thought to rest. When he finally lifted the gray cloth, picked up his brush, and applied the cinnabar red that was 20 years overdue to the figure's clothes, something strange happened. As the tip of the brush moved, the scene that had remained so vivid in his mind for 20 years began to fade rapidly. When the final stroke was laid and the painting stood complete before his eyes, Lin Mu was suddenly overcome by an unprecedented sense of emptiness. The shadow of his hometown, which had been pulsing with life in his dreams and haunting his thoughts, instantly turned into an ordinary, cold, and finished object. He suddenly realized that over the past 20 years, the reason he was able to maintain his sharp sensitivity toward architectural design and even endure his most exhausting moments was entirely because that painting was not finished. Because it was incomplete, his brain refused to close the case on that memory. It was an eternally open window, constantly feeding emotional energy into his subconscious. Psychologist Zeigarnik once observed a phenomenon. Waiters could clearly remember the orders of customers who hadn't paid yet, but as soon as the bill was settled and the customers left, the waiters would instantly forget the menu items. In this story, Lin Mu's successful architectural works are like paid bills. His brain considers the tasks achieved and removes them from active memory. However, the unfinished painting is like an unsettled account. It occupies a background program in Lin Mu's mind, constantly reminding and pulling at him.